Hello, this is Rebekah Freedom, and this is episode number 38 of Heard Not Seen, produced by John Beethan. Today's topic is going to be, what if the person you are in love with is not the person you want to be with? And for all you lucky souls who heard episode 38, 39, and 40, those have been pulled down. So we're starting back at 38 and giving you something even more sexy. So today, I of course, as many artists do, I am pulling from my personal experience and my life to share with you something I think that we all deal with and maybe are not honest with. About that there are two types of attractions in this world. Those people whose bodies you're magnetized to, those souls who have all the right looks, they meet the ideal in your mind about the different structures and how they are the catalog ad, and you're just like, I want that and I'll go after it, and you traverse all your insecurities. Am I hot enough? Are they out of my league? But that's what I want. And you're just pulled toward them. And generally, those are the type of people that will kill you, that will emotionally wreck you and take you down. Then conversely, there's the other side of the fence, the nice guys and the nice girls whose souls you may be magnetized to. But their bodies are just like sort of the goodwill of humanity. You're just searching for the awesome part, and so today that's what I mean. And John, I just love a little bit of feedback in here. Is if you know the distinction between sort of the hotness of the outside versus the hotness of the inside, and sometimes you don't get both. It's one or the other. Does that make sense to you?
Okay, I muted myself, but I'm here.
Jump on in.
So I'm just going to tell you, I always go for the inside because generally speaking, I can make the outside happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the point of this conversation, because there's this idea of don't settle, right? Don't settle for whatever less than your worth or whatever rah bullshit is out there when it comes to relationships. So, as always, this is just no good unless I tell the story. So let's just get into it, people. Let's get into it. Sit back, get your Carlo Rossi out, start chugging from the bottle. This is going to be a good one. This is get your liquor, get whatever it is that you need to kick back, chill out. It might be tea. You might be a tea person. All right. So essentially, I followed my instincts and an invitation, and I was invited to a charity event called Doors of Change, which is a local event on the North County coastline for youth that are homeless and are struggling. And it's a rehabilitation program that teaches them vocational skills, that gets them back on their feet and out in the world and successful. So I had a client invite me to this event, and I said, yeah, sure, I will happily participate. I did not have the money for the $300 ticket at the time, but it just felt so light to me. I thought, sure, I'll go. And so I spent the money on my credit card, and I went to the event, and I got all dressed up in my hippie glam outfit and wore this gorgeous burgundy dress that laced up the back and had my hair all curly and wispy eyelashes, the whole nine. And went to the event, and I was able, she said, well, you could sit at my table or you could sit at another table. And I thought, well, this is an event full of influential people. Maybe I'll roll the dice and try to sit at a table by myself. So I did that. And what ended up happening is, because I got the ticket so late, I got the table where they definitely put baby in the corner. Like, I was like, what the hell? These are like the auctioneers and like this couple that looks like they're maybe run a morgue. And
really?
Like, da-da-da-dun, da-da-da-dun. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So So I sit down and I just kept following the whole night was following my instincts. Hold on, people. This always drives me nuts. Somewhere between the podcast, I got a little, okay, there we go. So, I followed my instincts and I brought my oracle cards with me, my wisdom deck, and I just set them on the table next to me. And then this guy comes and sits down, and it was just, that was the only people at the table. And he sits down and I kind of look at him like, well, who are you? And we start to talk, and we all know the same people. It was ironic. We knew the same sort of crew, the quote unquote experienced tribe people in Encinitas, which is a collective of different healers and weirdos. And we, bantered back and forth and found out the usual suspects, the usual things, like, you're from New Jersey, I'm blah, 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 and this is what we're doing here, and so on and so forth. And then the event kicked off, and it was beautiful. There was a gala, and at the end of it, he was like, well, what are you doing afterwards? I was like, I'm probably just going to go home. I'm good. I had a good time. I didn't really get to network with anybody, but whatever. And then he's like, well, would you like to come back to my place for tea? And I was like, yeah, that felt light too. And when I say light, I really want to anchor in that there's this tool that I use from Access Consciousness called light or heavy. So that's basically, if there's a lightness in your body, like a relief and ease, that's a yes for you. That's like, yes, I can receive that. I'll go with the flow. If there's a heaviness, a contraction, that generally means there's a no for you. That's something that you're just not willing to receive or choose at that particular moment. And you can just follow the flow and choose light or heavy. And sometimes heaviness is just because you're carrying around somebody else's programming, So another question you can use for Access Consciousness is that mine? Is that actually mine? Does that feeling actually belong to me? Or is it a thought that I'm just picking up on? So that's how I actually got to the charity, to sitting at that table, to meeting. Well, we're just going to say Thundercat because I just for the sake of anonymity, met Thundercat and then, well, actually it's better to say New Jersey. That's better. Thundercat's my thing. We'll call him Jersey. And so met him and then decided to go back to his place. And the night just sort of flowed. It was really easy. Got there. He gave me a change of clothes. None of his roommates were home. So we had like the space to really drop in and, he's part of, so this is a distinction between a person who's done some educating as far as conscious communication goes and someone who is just stupid, has not done that sort of relating. And you may have some suggestions about how people can get plugged into being able to communicate better. So we'll touch base with that. So the example I have is when I went over to the house with Jersey, we got on the couch and I was all tight and balled up and in guarded stance because you don't know somebody, right? But I felt comfortable enough in the space where I could handle myself. Like I wasn't under threat, but I was very aware of that I was just getting to know this person and wasn't really ready to jump into like intimacy at that moment. And so his conscious communication was to ask me, well, do you desire physical touch right now? Which is a really clear invitation. Very just the undercurrent of that is I recognize there might be a boundary here. Like, what's your boundary around that? And my response was to just unfurl my body and stick my feet in his lap and he just started rubbing them, and that felt good and safe and progressive. So that's conscious communication. Just really knowing that you're in the invitation of what the person is comfortable with, and you're not in this obligatory energy. Conversely, I had a little bit of an adventure where I got invited to fly out to the East Coast and road trip back to Colorado with an ex. And that, wow, just no regrets. So thankful I did it. But the communication was not, do you desire touch right now? It was, look at what you do to me. You give me such a hard erection, grabbed my hand, put it on his penis, and was like, well, you could touch it. Will you rub it? Will you stroke it? Will you kiss it? You could do this. You could do that. And it wasn't, there wasn't this invitation for me to initiate the touch. There wasn't this, or even just an agreement. It was more, his almost a persistent initiation. And in that sense, it was a solicitation, not an invitation, and very like unconscious. My girlfriend and I, who's a tantrika, talked, she says, well, he probably watches a lot of porn, a lot of Bang Brothers, where the compliment to the female is like, look how big you made my erection. Like, you got me so hard. And I'm like, in no way is that a compliment. In fact, the first night that I was with him, I was like, your erection is not my responsibility. Like, just because you have an erection doesn't mean that I have to then perform. But what happened over the course of our time together is that the persistence sort of wore my psyche down, and I thought, I do have to perform. He has paid for the trip. He has blah, blah, blah. So that's the difference between conscious sort of respect, just basic respect for another human being's process, and somebody who's in more of a primal state. So that's a huge lesson. And God, I can't, and in some ways, you know, there's a lot of like joking about like the 90s sensitive guy. My dad.
So Rebekah, can I ask you a question?
Sure. Yeah.
So what was the lesson? Just think about it.
With obligatory.
Well, you said, you know, lesson. That was a lesson.
The real lesson was that in both scenarios, I had the power to really create the boundary. And one scenario, there was a lot more ease with creating, like, yeah, sure, I'll put my feet in your lap. That feels really good. And the other scenario, I had to overcome so much of my internal fears and objections to be able to create a different something. Because we got 3 days into the trip, and I said, hey, you know, I need you to drop me off at the airport. Like, this is
so one
not
experience
good.
Is light,
yeah,
and the other one is extremely heavy.
Super heavy, and just, but both of them so rich, in learning about my triggers and who I be and how to navigate obligation.
And what you decide to engage in?
Yeah.
With?
Yeah.
And
engage in and with who. Obligation versus invitation, which totally ties into, what if the person you love, the person you feel really magnetized to, physically turns you off, or financially turns you off, or they're just not there. You just look at them and you're like, God, you're such a great person, but I just don't see me weaving my life in with you. Right. And that creates such an internal conflict. It's just this polarity inside. And I always like to say that, you know, without doing the warm up, we have 2 wolves inside of us, which the one that are like good and evil and they're fighting and blah, blah, blah. Which one wins? The one you feed. And I have, you know, House and Senate, Republican, liberal inside of me. We have these like polarities, these paradoxical characters and coping mechanisms inside of us. And I certainly know that I do, that are always looking out and searching the horizon for our survival. They're always, you know, a little bit of hypervigilance and figuring out what's going to work for us. So what I would say is that when you're in the calculation of like, God, I'm so attracted to this person on one level, but repelled on another level, chances are you're in the fertile void, which is a Buddhist term, the bardo, which is just sort of this limbo, this space that you get to drop your stories about who you need to be and really lean back into who you actually are. I think there was a saying that's out there is only, I'm not going to get it right, but it was something to this distinction of like, only real assholes worry about themselves. Just don't worry about it. But be willing to learn from it. So as as I describe this contrast, I invite you listener into examining this for yourself. Like, what things are repellents for you? Is it physical, financial, spiritual? Maybe they're not spiritual enough, and what things are attractors? What things keep pulling you back and pulling you in? So to continue the story about Jersey, what ended up happening is that night we slept together and it felt really in the flow and easy. And then the next day, like, life went on and I didn't really think about it too much. I didn't, because it was just like one of those things that happened. But we stayed in contact and I invited him over to my house and we got physical with each other again, but this time it wasn't in the dark. It wasn't like a completely blacked out dark room. And it's funny how just a little bit of light can shed light on so much. So we just had an encounter where I got extremely triggered and I was like, this is not what I want. I'm completely turned off by all of these physical attributes. What am I doing? I'm way prettier than this person. Cue Beauty and the Beast. Till as old as time. Yeah. Fuck this shit. Song as old as rhyme. I'm not going to do this. Beauty and the... you get the point. So, Beast. So that happened and I went cold. I went dark. I did a 180. I was just like, I'm not into this. Like, get the fuck away from me. That was just a hookup. Leave me alone. And then the most extraordinary thing happened because I came from a place of being so used to guys ghosting on me, just using me as an object, just sort of like have a hookup and then move on with life and just being a commodity, my body being a commodity. And then he did something completely unexpected. And even in this moment, I'm gobsmacked by it. He ended up texting me because what happened is he left some things at my house and he's like, I'll stop by and get them. I walked down my driveway and I like shoved them in his hands and then turned around and came right back up my driveway because I was so livid about all the things that happened from the moment of being like, wow, we slept together. And then I didn't even realize all this until, you came to my place and light was shed on it. And I was just pissed and I was just mad at myself and mad for being in the situation again. And then he texted and he's like, I totally get if this is not in alignment for you, which again, conscious communication, alignment sort of being a term of, if you're not into it. But what really, and this is the word I used, but what really hurt was how cold you were when you saw me. He's like, I don't really get what happened. And I just kept throwing out my bullets and being a porcupine about it and defensive. But when he shared, it was like I would say a vulnerable share. To have something be like, that really actually hurt my feelings. And to have a guy specifically, where usually that would be my language, I would be like, well, I got my feelings hurt, so now I just have to suck it up, princess, and deal with it, right? And I can't really talk to anybody about it, because I'll complain to my girlfriends a couple times, and they'll be like, well, another one bites the dust, and just add it to the Rolodex of, like, I have no bedpost now because so many notches are in it. It's just whittled down to a toothpick, And... but this time that didn't happen. I had somebody who really knew conscious communication and how to articulate his truth. And that made my walls soften and come down. So a couple days went by and we had this really real conversation about, hey, these are all my triggers. When I see somebody who's out of shape, it makes me think they're not healthy. And if they're not healthy, that means they're going to die. And if they're going to die, that means it's another person in my life who I started to care about who's just inevitably going to leave.
Let's not forget everyone dies.
Yeah. And that we're wired for survival, right? So that is actually why symmetrical faces and people who taste good when you kiss them and the things you're physically attracted to are part of the factor in because of biological imperative. There's just something instinctual about what you're physically attracted to and about healthy, strong bodies, right? When you see women with wide hips, that's like they're going to bear children, and guys with like broad shoulders and strong jaws and all of that, right? They're the alpha males of the pack, right? And I was like, I'm fucking with a beta. Damn it. I have, what am I doing? I'm like, I'm clearly an alpha female, right? So I had to just face all the bullshit, like all of it. Like I'm this strong woman because I've just constructed that personality to navigate through life. It's gotten me really far. I know how to be in masculine energy and just be action oriented, act first, don't feel it or talk about it later. But we really talked about it. We like really, really talked about it. Using some templates of nonviolent communication. When you do this, it makes me feel. When you say that, this is what it brings up for me. This is the story I have around that feeling, which you get to mine the origins of things. And again, my story was, well, my parents died. So when I see somebody who's unhealthy, I immediately, the alarm bells, or what I deem as unhealthy, the alarm bells go off, and I don't want any part of it, right? I just want to keep myself. Plus, I have my own physical ailments and imperfections, and those bug me enough. That's enough to deal. So then the second, of course, just phenomenal event happened from that conversation. I said, well, I'm leaving. I'm going to go on this road trip with this random ex of mine. And Jersey was like, well, what if I come over before you go? Like, what if I come back over? And I was like, okay. And then he did. And the conversation stayed in that lane of just radical honesty. And we fell into this like 48-hour love fest, I guess you could say. And we just fell into this, like, I've never experienced this level of honesty before. There's a lot of chemistry and this pull, this just pull energy, not a push, not a, oh, he's got such potential. I just want to get the potential out. None of that. It was just like shockingly alive and magnetic. And I'm sure if he listens back to this, he'll be like, it's embarrassing. I've had him listen to some podcasts where we had, go ahead. Yeah. John's looking at me.
He's probably going, who? Me?
Who, me? Ego stroke.
So you had him listen to some of the podcasts?
Yeah, I had him listen to a podcast where
Which one do you remember?
Well, the one that's now deleted.
Oh.
Yeah, which I will, just because it was so juicy.
I know.
I will.
It was raw as well.
Raw. It was definitely intimate. And so I went on the road trip. I was gone for 10 days. Over the course of those 10 days, we continued to have these really deep conversations. And I felt like I had somebody in my corner who was cheering me on. And both him and I were like, we don't know what's happening here. We don't really understand what this is. And I made it through the trip. I made it through my lessons and obligation. My reminder of, I spent some time in Colorado, of what it's like to be a place where you know who you are, because you have so much history there and so many memories and just feel so anchored. And just, God, what a journey to go through. And then came back to just have it be crunchy again. It wasn't like, oh, it was like, what the fuck are we doing? What's going on? And I will say this as an emphasis, because I think this is where people get caught up. And what if the person I love is not the person I want to be with? We feel this urgency to rush into a label, this urgency. And it's, again, I don't want to offer that as people who are commitment phobic or who have codependency issues that I can't get my needs met. It's really being true about presencing yourself, being in the present moment and saying, do I want to choose this? Do I want to continue to choose this? Is this something I want to wake up and choose? And you get to be in negotiation and formulation around what that is. There'll be just a friendship structure that'll be born of the choosing of communication. Will there be like a romantic structure, a sexual structure, financial? Like all of that gets to sort of just naturally rise to the surface. But what we do in our discomfort is we feel an attraction, and then we'll naturally acquiesce to a predestined role of I'm a girlfriend now. I'm a boyfriend now. So that means I must behave in this way. I must, feel like, oh, I have agreed to monogamy. But what if your partner is like, I have, air quote, agreed to monogamy without the actual radical honesty of saying, hey, I'm actually open to exploring with other people. So what I'm saying is there's moments, and this is what's coming of this relationship, where you get to navigate, if you're gonna just get on a track that's like what they call a cow path. Is cows will walk the same path over and over again till it creates a rut, and then you'll just see those cow trails. And we do that as people. We say, oh, we're just going to follow this track. And my cousin says it best. She's like, yeah, my life is predictable and I like predictable, but I'm bored. And cool. Some people, boring is just exactly the zone they want to be in. That's just where they want to be, because at least boring sort of dissuades discomfort. So this is a really uncomfortable relationship. And
I've always said comfort's the booby prize.
The booby prize. Say more.
Well, comfort. You said it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
One thing's for sure, which is there will be growth and awareness and learning. And on the other side, or in between, or during the whole process, you'll be Rebekah 2.0.
Yeah, just the expanded version. And this is what's so amazing about relationship. And I've been single, chronically single for a long time. Just, drive-through relationships don't give you the depth of reflection that someone who keeps coming back does. This is why I get why people have this deep longing to be in relationship, but this also aversion to it. Because an actual, real, healthy relationship is painful. There's pain. There's a lot of pain points. There's a lot of edges that get
there can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to say painful and like, oh, it's abusive and therefore you're learning and you need to be, abusing yourself. So let me give a real example of this. So a real fucking example of this. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. So the thing I want to say is there's a Bible verse about steel sharpening steel, that you, by being honest, being true with yourself and with the other, you get to be better. And in relationship, it's not the rupture, the disruption that matters. It's the repair. Like, how do you go back and communicate your way through that? So here's the example of what I would say was an unskilled communication, but something I became aware of. So I got back, he picked me up from the airport, and we spent some really just lovely time together, and it felt so good to be back. And I was like, it's so good to like not have to communicate with words, but we can communicate with touch. And that was really amazing. And there's that, for me, it's like that irritating pull to just want to be with somebody all the time. And it was causing some discomfort because I was like, that also feels like a threat to my independence, which I value because it's made me survive as long as I have. And so what ended up happening is the very same things that triggered me in the first time started being aggravating again. And I just was like, God, these are all things that can be fixed. Like if we both just lose weight and work out and, you know, do some like beauty regimen stuff, then it's non-issue. But I didn't really own it very well. So what happened is we went to coffee, and rather than just be blunt and own, can you fix these things? Because that didn't feel good to say. I stupidly was like, if you could edit things about me physically.
Let's just give away some power, shall we?
Because I was like, my brain's like, maybe if he makes you feel it first, then that means you'll be on equal playing field, whatever. So he told me just if I was the ideal body type, like what things he would edit. Jesus.
God, it's so, you experience things so differently than me.
Yeah.
I don't have that list.
Thank God. Well, the thing is, interestingly enough, he named all the things that I've internally struggled with my whole life, because I learned early on just that being attractive means power, and that in turn, but being attractive doesn't mean you get to have people stick around. So what happened is, I would try to wield that power as an attractive woman, and I would turn into an object inevitably. And then I wanted to punish men for that. I wanted to get in this punishing energy. But what happened is I punished myself for not being thin enough, for not being toned enough. My tits weren't the right size. They were not firm enough or whatever. And so he went through the list, and he struggled through it. I don't want to give the impression that he was like, well, just do this and this and this. That he was like, this is a trap. This is a trap. This is one of your woman traps. But what's the benefit of doing this? I was like, I don't know. Can you just do it? So he did, and he shared, and it was about like my TNA and just like toneness of my body and whatever else. It was all the things that I've internally struggled with. And then I was able to say the physical ailments or physical things that I wasn't stoked about with him. And there was a bruised part of my ego, definitely from it, that just got defensive and pissed. And this is where this topic comes out of, is like, oh my God, what if I love somebody, but now I'm going to let the physical stuff become so much of a priority that I just give up on it and go back to the chase of the ideal. This is the Aesop's fable moment in this podcast, and I hope you can feel the weight of it. Will you spend your lifetime chasing the ideal? Because we don't want it to be messy, and we don't want to be flawed, and we think somehow there's salvation in perfection. There's not. This is an evolution. This is an evolutionary journey, and it's really fucking messy. And by messy, I mean that we just have experiences, and some of them don't have closure, and sometimes we're left to pick up pieces, and we don't have the awareness or the skills to navigate the pain that we feel, or rejection or abandonment, and then we'll reach for self-help, and there's lots of like love yourself messages, but you're like, God, that feels like we skipped 12 steps. Breakup, rehab, 12 steps, that is. I was kidding. We skip steps to how do you get to love yourself when you just are so despondent and confused and don't know what to do.
Probably can't.
Yeah. So I went about this really interestingly. We had this conversation, and it rattled both of us heavily. But then what I felt on the other side of it was like, well, I want to love you anyway. And I want this to keep going. And I don't understand why the pull is so strong, and I don't understand the outcomes, or
May I?
Yes, of course.
You may have heard me say before, the mind cannot understand the matters of the heart.
Yeah.
So don't even try. So when you don't understand, often it's a matter of the heart.
It's the heart that matters.
Ooh.
And it's such a powerful guide if we just, and I think that that's the mental question that was posed. What if I love this person? The mind is aware of a magnetic love, but they don't meet my ideal. Now what do I do? Who do I be? How do I show up in this? And I would say that I'm fortunate enough that Jersey is somebody who is willing to navigate that paradox, those murky waters, those areas where it's like, this isn't easy. And he was so eloquent today, and in all of his descriptions in the conversations where we've had, where he's like, I sort of sometimes lean back and just like, why can't this be easy? He's like, but what I realize is on all my honeymoon periods with other girls where it was super easy, quote unquote, and you hide your icky parts, 4 months would go by and then the relationship would end, and it was like, what? Why? Like, what happened? It was so good. And he's like, this is better than bliss. This is real. And he's like, I like waking up and being able to choose you. And I was like, yeah, that feels really good. And then he had a little bit of a misstep where he was like, well, do you want to be in an open relationship? And I was like, what? And then the language changed to, well, why don't we both just keep choosing this until we don't want to choose it anymore? And I was like, yes. So to answer the question, what do you do if you love somebody, but they're not the person you quote unquote want to be with because they don't match an ideal, or there's some glitch in your matrix or whatever? You just return to the fact that you have a choice in the matter. Your hands aren't tied ever. You get to say no. You get to use your voice. And if you're lucky enough and skilled enough, the other person's going to choose it too.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you get to choose. You can say yes too.
You can say yes as well and lean in. And so today's conversation, because I woke up pissed and today's conversation, I woke up aggravated and sort of in an old pattern of just like, I sent him some pictures and it was like, well, I'm not perfect, but this is what I have to work with, And what we talked about, he's like, listen, I really just want you to get that I am totally attracted to you. You asked me to edit you and I told you what my ideal was, but that's an ideal that I picked up a long time ago as a boy, and I was like, I realized, I have a scheme that I picked up a long time ago too. And I think what happens is when you choose somebody's soul, that their external beauty starts to match that. You see their soul and you see past the flesh and blood, and you realize that the depth of relating is what really matters. And you get to form your relationship from a place of radical honesty and truth. And it's okay. And it's okay to do that. And you're not less of a person because of your looks, right? And I think that ultimately is where we get into the muck and the mire of this, is our own self-worth, our self-esteem, and our value, and how we're prioritizing that. So what I want to say in closing today's podcast is, if you're in these relationships where you're not getting what you want, or you feel like you'll never get what you want, or you feel like you're in concessions or compromise, I invite you into real conversation with me. Leave comments below, of course, or reach out to me at RebekahFreedom.com. That's REBEKAH freedom.com. And we'll do the deep work needed for you to create the love you want.